It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This is the Cosmick Voice. Cosmick Voice. Music, talk, and nothing but business with your hosts, Chris Natalini and Mick Michaels. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cosmick Voice. This is Season 5, Episode 3. I am here with my co-host, Chris Natalini.
Hello.
And I am Mick Michaels. Welcome back, everyone, to another show. Chris, how are you, sir?
Mick, I'm doing good, my brother. The Halloween season is officially over as we're recording this. You know, kind of sad it's over. Put all my Halloween stuff away. It was a good month. It was a good run.
You got to keep, listen, just like Christmas, you got to keep it in your heart all year round. Maybe you leave something out. Like I leave a little old-time ceramic Christmas tree out all year with the lights that go around it. So every so often, I plug that thing in, turn it on, and it's Christmas, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Yeah, there's a couple things we left. My house has been overrun by Halloween gnomes, which is apparently a thing this year. So we kept them out. And a few candles we kept out. But, now we're moving into the Christmas season and coming up on the end of another year. Other than that, everything's good, man. Same old, just busy. Trying to get through, How about you?
I'm pretty good, doing well. My motto anymore is one moment at a time. And even that I'm not sure I can handle anymore. So I try to take it, little by little. Before you know it, the day's over. And then you get to do it all over again. So
all over again.
Yeah, I have learned, I guess, in the last couple of years not to project too far ahead anymore. Because, we've learned that the bottom can fall out at any time. I guess we always knew that, but then there's that, we go through life, we get kind of wrapped up in everything, and we forget that. We forget that really tomorrow doesn't exist, per se, in the grand scope. All we have is right here, right now, and in a moment that becomes the past. I know this sounds real otherworldly, but it really is the truth if you think about it. So why worry too much about tomorrow or the next day or the next day and the next day? And we talked about this in the show. Like, a lot of times I've worried so much about the next show or the next set of shows that I kind of missed out on the show that I was doing at that moment.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's a thing that you just kind of pick up as you get older and more life experience kind of has rolled you over a few times, backed up on you, rolled you back over, flipped you around, that kind of thing.
It's true, man. There's a couple people, that are close to me in my life and they worry, and I always go, listen, like, worrying is not going to change the outcome of anything. What's going to be is what's going to be. So you just have to kind of, be ready for both and go, if this happens, I'm going to deal with it this way. And if this happens, I'm going to deal with it this way. But worrying about what's going to happen in the future is, I get it. It's total human nature, but worrying, it doesn't unfortunately change it. So magical thinking, I think, is what it's called. When you worry about something so much that like your brain thinks that if you worry about it so much, you have the power to change it. Unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
It's
It's one of those things that we're trying to, we try to, like you're saying, we think we have control, so we make ourselves believe we have control.
Right.
But in reality, we don't have control.
Yeah, we don't.
Pretty much like a band dealing with a venue or a record label or, trying to make it or convert the audience. We just got to do the best that we can and see what happens from there. But like you said, we just got to be prepared to roll with the punches.
That's it, man. That's it. And, and I know it's easier said than done because there are some things that are pretty devastating in our lives and hard to deal with. But, there's nothing you could do. So you just got to kind of learn to deal with it.
Yeah, listen, which actually brings up what we're going to talk about in this episode. It
does?
Yeah, it's life lessons learned from being in a band. Yep. So, we already just started talking about some stuff, but let's dive in a little deeper about life lessons learned from being in a band or being on the road or, whatever you've picked up along the way. What do you got, man? What are you thinking about?
Well, I think one of the things that comes to mind is, well, pretty much what we just talked about. You know, I definitely have made it a habit, unfortunately, where I put so much pressure on myself and a show that it's taken me a long time to realize that you can only do your best, right? Like, the shows are going to go how they're supposed to go. You can only hope that you as a band, you play well, the crowd's there, it's a good night. Obviously, nothing in life is perfect. So I found myself a very long time ago worrying about everything. Is this going to be right? Is this going to be right? Am I going to feel right? Am I going to sound right? Are we going to be good? And I realized that you just kind of have to put faith in what you do and how you do it and what the show is going to be. And if it's not great, then it's not great. There's nothing you could do about it. Or, like we had said a very long time ago, you learn from that. What could I have done differently? Could I have promoted it differently? Could we have, is there a certain problem in a song? Do we need to work on that differently or whatever? But I think a big part of that is I learned that putting so much pressure on a show and a performance doesn't always pan out. It's going to be what it's going to be. You just have to have trust and faith in what you're doing and what the guys or ladies surrounding you are doing and hope for the best. And just realize that it's going to be what it's going to be. I've been able to kind of put that into my own everyday life and even with work life, because I'm a driver and I'm out on the road every day. I go, okay, what's today going to be like? You obviously you just hope for a good, easy, non-traffic day. Sometimes it doesn't do that. So you just have to kind of prepare yourself for that and, and hope for the best and just hope that it's going to be good. And if it's bad, you go, wow, I just got to deal with it. And because there's just some things that are beyond our control, unfortunately.
Well, definitely. So that brings up a point, like when you're on the road and you're touring, and if you're driving, there's only so much control you have when you're dealing with other drivers and other cities and routes and construction and stuff. And I remember being caught in vacationing traffic. And not realizing that going into that area, just because we were never in that area before. I'm like, what's going on here? And then we realize, oh yeah, this is, and we were literally in traffic for a couple hours, just kind of crawling, and you're getting all jammed up. But then after a certain point, you're like, well, what are you going to do? So, I mean, I think some pre-planning is always good. I mean, you can't kind of, and I've been with people that kind of don't plan anything. It's kind of a seat of the pants type of thing, and it's always like, if you don't mind that type of intensity all the time, well, then, that's the way it goes, right? But not everybody kind of handles that the same way. And I don't think it's needed. It's like unnecessary, right? In terms of, there's enough stress sometimes when you're on the road as it is. But if you can have a pre-planned route, nowadays, back in the map days and basic GPS where it didn't really tell you real time with the roads. Now you kind of have a heads up, and you can make some, if you're using that technology, and you can make some adjustments and stuff like that and be prepared. So, that's kind of a cool thing.
It's Russ the Boss.
Take it down. This is Stephen Pearson from Rat, the Rat Bastard. You're listening to the Cosmick Voice.
What I've learned, and again, I think anyone listening could say, well, you can learn this from any aspect in life. It doesn't have to be about being in a band or, being on the road or whatever. And they're absolutely right, because I think if you're involved in anything, a lot of the same human conditioning, human need type of things, they'll show up because that's what we are, humans, right? So there's only so much diversity you're going to really have. We're all affected by the same things. We have similar feelings and similar thoughts and similar hopes and dreams and things like that. I've learned over the years that not everyone does it like I do it. And I know that sounds obvious, but when you have this thing in your head and passion's pushing it, and you're like, I got to get it done, it's got to be this way, I can see it, not everybody shares that same vision. Not everybody shares the same dream, and I think we've talked about that before. That doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's not worth it. It's just that it may not be taken or likened to the same aspects that you're doing it or having, So you have to, sometimes that causes stress. And even within your band, and I've learned that over the last few years more than I did in years prior, because I would just push and push and push, And I felt, and I still feel, that, you know, it's for the betterment of what we're doing, not for the individual per se. But I have found that it does sometimes then push people out or away, or it demotivates them. I've learned how to kind of maybe delegate that with myself a little better. Yeah. And like you're saying, then it does go over into, you know, your everyday daily life as well. You start realizing, well, maybe I'm doing it all the time and not realizing it. I mean, I don't feel that there was ill intent, at least from my point of view, but with people doing multiple things or other aspects of their life, and this is one portion of it, maybe not the whole portion of it, that can become a little taxing, right? You're like, oh man, here we go again. You know, it's always the next thing. I've learned how to regulate and delegate that with myself on a much better level. And so I've learned to let some things go and figure, you know, kind of like, what's the don't sweat the small stuff. But I'm also learning not to sweat the big stuff as much. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
you
got to have that balance. You can't know the light if you don't know the dark, kind of thing. And again, it's still a work in progress for me. A lot of these life lessons are still a work in progress for me. It's not easy. It's not. Anytime you're in a room with somebody else, it becomes more difficult. When you're by yourself, you can agree to yourself till you're blue in the face and still get something done. And but when there's other people, sometimes you have to take into consideration, especially if the goal is the same, they may just not have the same road, right? Not everybody's taking the exact same road, because they say, oh, well, we're seeing the same destination, but, you know, I think we should take it this way. And I think it's important to take all that in, especially when you're looking long term. Like at this stage of the game for me, I'm just trying to make it long term, or as long term as I can make
as you
it.
can, yeah.
I mean, the big stardom stuff, that doesn't exist. I don't think it's, you know, that's not a feasible goal. Becoming a quadruple millionaire, that probably, in music, that probably isn't the goal anymore. You know, it's just not something. It's about continuing to write good music, hopefully get better at it, and then there's that underlying dream that, hey, maybe one of those songs just might hit. Just even in the smallest of how that would happen, I don't know. You never know, but that other stuff like that rock stardom and that MTV Cribs thing and all that, that's not even in the scope anymore.
Yeah, especially for what we do right now. It's even further away than it was a number of years ago. At least, you know, a number of years ago, there was a chance, because of the kind of music we do now, the kind of music that you and I do is you can be successful at it, but to be, you know, to say that, you know, I want to be this big rock star, or whatever, that's just not happening anymore. You know, I mean, there's really no big rock stars now anyway, but in terms of what we do, it's even harder and less now, because the scene and the music has changed so drastically. You know, in our genres of music that we do, we could be successful because there will always be people for that, but to be the big stars that we wanted to be many years ago, that's just not happening in our lives anymore.
Yeah, I think longevity is, again, this is something that I've learned, I guess, being in a band all these years as well, is success is relative or irrelative, depending on how you look at it. But what are you trying to achieve? If at this point you're just trying to keep going, well, that's success in itself, because how many bands... I know there's a lot of bands. I remember I played when this band first got together, within the first year or two, we played a festival, and from that festival, there's not one band that's still together.
Yeah.
Except us.
Yeah, I believe that.
And there's, you know, you'll see that quite often. Bands just come and go, disappear, change up, you know, go a different route. And then we lost a lot of bands during the COVID pandemic and the rebuild. Yeah. The fact that we're still here, we're still doing some stuff, to me is success. And
for sure.
Yeah, so I've learned how to balance that a little better, to say, you know, that's a plus. Where maybe, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, I would have said, I wouldn't have agreed 100%. I would say that it was successful, but I would say, you know, I would be looking at these other aspects for success. Like, we have to hit these marks. But you know, I'm still releasing music each year. I got videos, I got, you know, this, I got that. I'm still playing live. Maybe not as much as I used to, but that was a choice.
Right.
And I think that, too, is something else that I've learned. And again, like I said, any of these things can be learned from being in any aspect in life, in any walk of life. But, you know, relating it to music, it's like, you know, is it worth doing this now, or can I just do it this way? And I think at a certain point in time, every band, every artist, regardless of, you know, whether you're up at Kanye West's level or you're still down in the gutter with, you know, the rest of us, you can make a decision. It's like, well, I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's just my personal choice. Like, just because I haven't made Metallica status doesn't mean that I need to continue to do that or take that, right? It doesn't, you know, because then it's like,
No,
well,
100%.
who are you to decide that? You're not, you know, you're not Motley Crue and you're not, you know, Led Zeppelin. Yeah, well, who cares? That's right. I'm not, never going to be. But that doesn't mean I don't have the right to make these decisions and go, no, I don't want to do that show. No, I don't want to play at 1 a.m. No, I don't think I'm going to travel down to whatever, you know, another state or something like that. Now I'm going to avoid that. You know, I think that we have that right. We have that option, and it does make things more digestible for us over time. So we don't feel like it's, oh man. Like if you decide that you don't want to do it, because like I said, now for us, we used to do, 40, 50 shows. I think 61 year we did. And again, that's not, in my opinion, that's really not a lot compared to some other bands, but it's a lot more than other bands. But based on our schedule, what we were doing, plus our private lives, that was a lot. And now we do maybe half or less than that. And we even got to a point that we were talking about, hey, listen, maybe we do 10 shows a year and 2 small tours.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe second and fourth quarter or something like that. And we can maximize it. We can get the same benefit, even more, from less. So that's something else I've learned, definitely on the road and being in a band all this, you know, in this, focusing on this business, is less is more. Like the less equipment I get to take out on the road, the more time I have, I'm serious, the more time I have to enjoy the show or to enjoy just being in a different area. I'm not lugging equipment. We recently were on tour. Another touring band was on before us. We had never played with them before. They had so much equipment. It was unbelievable how much equipment they had. They didn't even do a 40-minute set. Maybe 40. Yeah. Maybe they did get about 40 minutes. Maybe, but it just didn't seem. It went so fast. They had more pedals than you could shake a stick at, which then meant more cables.
Yeah,
it was crazy. It was crazy, and it just took forever to get off the stage. We carry minimal stuff, small drum set. I carry a 212 cabinet with just a rack. James carries, a 210 bass cabinet and a micro head. I mean, so much that you could stick it in your pocket. That's how small. Yeah. But it just pumps. And then, of course, our guitars, and Frankie just carries a lunchbox with his microphone in it, and that's it. You know what I mean? I think he has more gum and antiseptic for his throat than he does equipment. So we've definitely learned that less is more, because the quicker we can set up, the quicker we can get a sound check or a line check, and the more we can play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we can actually extend our set even by a song or two, because we know our setup and teardown is minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What else you got?
Definitely one thing that I have definitely learned through the years. Long time ago, I just assumed that everybody in a band was on the same page, right? And we were all striving for the same thing in the same way. And as I got older, guys quit, guys get fired, you change members, whatever. You realize that that's not necessarily true. And as you become band brothers with these people, you realize that everybody's different. Everybody's lives different. Their vision may be the same, but it's not as committed as yours. Like, they're willing to do the work, willing to do the dedication, but there's other things that are number one and number two in their lives, which is totally fine. And when I was younger, that really bothered me, because I was like, if we're doing this, we should all be on the same page. And as I got older, especially because as I got older, I started to get in bands with guys with families, with kids and wives and stuff like that. And I've said it before on this podcast, I don't have kids. So I have a little more freedom in my time and life that that some people do. And I started to realize that it was okay that even though, someone had kids and family and, that was a little more important, but the dedication was there. I started to learn that was okay. And maybe that was very selfish of me because I'm very passionate about what I do. I mean, obviously I've been doing it for so long and I have no, I definitely haven't even considered quitting at this point. I started to realize that you have to deal with people different ways and that it was okay that things happen. And sometimes people just have different ways of looking at it. I've definitely learned that as I've gotten older, and I've definitely gotten better with it for sure. Even during COVID, like when that hit, that's when I really realized that, man, we do spend a lot of time away from our family and our close friends. And now it's even more important to me, especially now as I get older, that, maybe, missing a rehearsal or, not scheduling rehearsal on a certain day to be with family, or, you gotta take your kids somewhere. Maybe it's not such a bad thing, because sometimes that makes your band stronger because you do have outside things. And I know that you and I are talking about that, later on this season. So I started to learn that not everybody is on the same page as you, and everybody may be passionate, but maybe the passion's not as strong as you. And you have to learn how to deal with that when problems arise or band meetings come around, and you have to kind of, find your way and, and how to talk to other people. I learned that, there's just certain ways you should talk to people. You're conducting business, your band is a business, and you have to realize that some people don't learn and some people aren't as passionate as you are because there are other more important things to them, and that's a hard, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy to juggle, when you're in a band trying to get things done because you want to do this and you want to do this and we should do this and we should do this. And you have a guy in your band that, or whomever, two guys, whatever it may be, that doesn't feel that way because they have there's other, I don't want to say important things because that's not, obviously families and kids are more important than anything. Sometimes your passion and someone else's passion just isn't on the same page, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to kind of learn to deal with it and kind of meet in the middle, and that's the most important thing, and try to maneuver that to get where you would like to be. And sometimes that's not always easy, but you could do it if you're willing to put in that kind of work and have that kind of conversation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, like with any relationship, compromise, flexibility, kind of some, compassion, empathy, that type of thing. I think it's key. I think when a band first starts, it's put together, everybody's kind of like, there is 100%, everybody's excited and they're willing to make the extra sacrifices and they go the extra mile and all that kind of stuff. But then over time, as things start to get more laid in or they become, routine, people start finding that, like, I need to do this. And maybe that understanding on their significant other or their other responsibilities may not be as flexible. They may not be as flexible. Say, well, I got to kind of balance this out a little bit. In the beginning's one thing, but as time goes on, I do have to, if I still have a full-time job, I need to balance that out, and doing what you can.
Yeah.
And this is what kind of goes back to me saying just a little bit ago that you start choosing what's more important. Like, is really doing this group of shows important if it's going to cause all this extra grief?
Right.
Like, and I think over time, band members start pushing back a little bit, like, hey, I'm not really interested in doing that, and this, that, and the other thing. And I know what you're saying because I have a difficult time with that too, even today. Though I've gotten better at it, it is very difficult. And sometimes when you get involved in that type of situation, the other people, they only see it their side, you see it only your side, and it does get difficult to meet somewhere in the middle. Sometimes, like you said, it's just a matter of how did you communicate it, right? Like, what's the best way to communicate it? Because not everybody's going to communicate the same exact way.
Right.
Especially if outside influence is kind of pulling at them, like a significant other, family responsibilities, job responsibilities, and then they're feeling all this pressure because they don't want to let people down, but at the same time, they've got to balance out, well, what's the real life of this? What's the
Right.
real life, repercussion
Right.
that if I don't do this? Okay, if I miss a show, is it really that big of a deal? Whereas, if I miss a week worth of work, how big of a deal is that, right? So you have to
Right.
kind of take some of that, and then as we get older, other aspects in life start kind of taking precedence, like health, care for, older relatives,
Yeah.
things of that nature that, you don't necessarily have to deal with when you're a band in their 20s, 30s, even your early 40s, if you're lucky enough. But as you do get older, I mean, you may have health problems yourself, which is,
Yeah.
could be unfortunate, but it happens to all of us. It doesn't matter, how great of a player or musician or songwriter you are. These kind of things in real life do pop up. So that compromise, that flexibility, that understanding, that willingness to say, hey, listen, you know what? Maybe you're right. We don't have to do this, but let's get some options. You know what I mean? Right. Sometimes the guy, the messenger is always the bad guy. Sometimes I feel that as myself, as the guy who's kind of having everything come across the desk, and then I have to relay that to everybody. Sometimes it's taken as, well, I'm saying that we need to do this. Well, no, I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm presenting it to you with options.
Right.
You let me know, is this what you want to do or not do? I mean, there are plenty of things that come across the desk that I don't even bother telling you guys about because I know it's a complete waste of time.
Right.
But then the other things that, could there be a remote? I don't want to, because if I said, well, I passed up on that. Well, why did you pass on that? You should have said that. So I, as transparent as you possibly can. Hey, guys, what do you want to do? And then sometimes you get some pushback and, whatever. And sometimes, like you said, you don't know what's going on in people's lives all the time. You have to kind of give leeway to that. Some people don't share everything. Some people don't, whatever. And I get that. Sometimes what I find to be difficult is you spend all this time with people, and sometimes the longer that you're with them, the further you're getting away from one another. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Where in the early stages, it's like kind of everybody's up everyone's rear end, and then over time, it's not like that anymore. Now, I don't know if it's because everybody's kind of settled into their role and knows that, hey, I only need to do this much to get this much out of it, and, I'm not going to worry about it until the moment that I have to, or, hey, there's somebody that's their job to worry about it, so I don't have to worry about it. So, and then, issue can arise from that. Resentment, I'm speaking from a lot of personal experience. Resentment, discomfort, and you start shutting down. And you just decide, well, you know what, I'm not even going to bother talking to you about it. I'm just either going to do it or we pass on it, So that compromise, that flexibility, that understanding, the willingness to make things work. And, sometimes if you just kind of work through it, you find out, hey, this worked out better than we thought to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just taking whatever was offered at face value, hey, we did it this way and it kind of worked out, And then, the reality of it is we don't have to be up each other's rear end 24/7 anymore. I mean, when we're adults, older adults, we can come to the nucleus and then kind of separate and then come back again and still have that same whatever. I think a prime example of that, if you wanted to see, if you watch the documentary on the Beatles that's on the Disney station from Peter Jackson, you can actually see the band falling apart. And I guess that was the biggest bummer for that whole thing for me. Like, you could see that it was 4 separate guys doing whatever they wanted to do, and then the Beatles thing, except for Paul McCartney, became like an afterthought, a secondary. But the exciting thing is at the end, at the rooftop concert, they were all professional enough and knew the importance of what they were doing at that moment to pull together. Now, that's professional. That's that's the collective goal. Unfortunately, after that, it was over. But they knew that you don't destroy something like what you do in private's one thing, because again, a lot of that was kind of private time, in that documentary. I'm not exactly sure how they expected to truly edit it back then, but to see that kind of strife within the world's most popular band at the time, most successful band at the time. Most beloved band at the time, because it really put me off at times. I was kind of like, wow, man, you could just see the dividing line between all 4 of them. And but like I said, at the end, they pulled it all together and they showed, that professionalism. So it is possible, but at the same time, I think that once band members lose that level of camaraderie to some extent, where the respect lines have been crossed, even in the smallest amount, I think it's very hard to rectify. So that's why that communication, that willingness to do something needs to kind of remain.
You are listening to The Cosmick Voice with your hosts, Chris Natalini and Mick Michaels.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. I definitely go into, any band situation. Again, something I've learned, instead of talking behind each other's back to one of the other members, because usually in a band, there's always closer members. Not everybody is as close as, there's always a guy or three guys that are closer than with other two or other one. Like there's always some kind of closeness where it's not the full band, right? Like everybody's close, but some guys are closer.
Sure.
And so instead of talking about it with other members of the band that you're close with, I'm a big proponent of going, look, if there's an issue, let's sit down, let's talk about it, let's get out in the open, because you don't know what that other person is thinking. You could go, listen, as a band, this is how we feel about what you're doing or what you're not doing. And you go, oh, well, I didn't see it that way. This is what's going on. And then you go, oh, well, this whole time we're thinking this, and it's really not. You're just going through something, or maybe you're not getting it and you were afraid to say, whatever the case may be. So I'm a huge proponent, especially now as I've gotten older, that communication is, as any relationship, communication is the most important thing. To go, listen, this is what we should be doing, this is what we shouldn't be doing. And I think too that it does bring you closer as people and as a band. And you have to approach that kind of talking points with kid gloves, but you're all humans, you're all people, you all bleed the same, and you all want the same thing. You're all in a band together, so there definitely should be a mutual respect of a conversation. And I'm a big proponent of, hey man, let's just sit and talk, especially if you're having issues at home, or even if you don't want to talk about your issues, then at least come into rehearsal and the show and go, hey, listen, I'm going through some things. If I seem a little off, that's why. And you go, all right, cool. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine. Like, I don't need to know every little detail, but as long as I know that if you're telling me that something's wrong and I know that, then I'll be able to work around that and respect your feelings and emotions at that time. Or, maybe I'll just kind of step back a little bit and I won't be as aggressive, towards you. If you're having issues, I'll just go, okay, cool. Like if there's a problem somewhere, then I'll just step back and I'm here if you need to talk. And I think communication is so important in a band. It really, truly is, whether it's about music, whether it's about anything. And I think this communication is just huge, and just sitting down for 10 minutes and, just talking things over, I think is super important. I really do. And that's one thing I've always thought that should happen. And it does. I mean, I've had some issues in bands that, communication was not the best, but I've always been big on communicating for sure. And that's definitely something I've learned, that communication helps. I mean, it may not turn out the way you want it, because maybe it ends up in someone leaving. Communication is the best, man. That's hugely important. It's important in our normal everyday lives too, whether it's your job, whether it's your family, whether it's your, the person you're spending your life with. It's important. It's important. That's that's something I've learned, because you are dealing with other people, right? Like, everybody has different personalities. Everybody doesn't think the same as you. And like I said before, the passion's not the same. Dedication's not the same, especially with a guy like me who doesn't have a family and kids. And, I have a decent job, but let me tell you, if I got the opportunity to pack my bags, I'm gone. But I can do that. That I have that. I'm able to. That's the life that I have. And some people just don't have that. And that's okay. That's okay. But I have to realize that not everybody is like that.
Yeah, I think that the communication then provides you the opportunity for options, right?
Yeah.
Even if, like you said, you don't have to know every aspect of what the situation is, because it may not be any of your business. It may relate to sensitive topics, sensitive material that involves other people outside the scope of the band, which, you have to respect that. That's privacy. However, if everybody's on the same page, where they're like, listen, trying to make this work, I just don't know if I could do it this way or this way, what options we have. Well, then that's when brainstorming happens, right? Then you know that everybody's at least on the same team. But if you're constantly hitting that brick wall with one member, two members, or a situation, well, then, like you said, maybe there has to be a talk about, like, hey, maybe we have to go some other way. But you can't fire back and go, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. No, it's like, listen, it's not going to work right now for me because of everything else that's going on. Though, sometimes people do take advantage of that for their own benefit, right? Like, I'll use, like, we're in such a society now that, if you say there's an issue, nobody can really question it because of the way things are. I've found that people will give you more reasons why they won't do something than reasons why they will do something or should do something, right? And the thing is if you tell people enough of reasons why you can't, after a while, they start using that same excuse too. It's like it's just a matter of, like, it's psychosomatic. We all start believing it. Well, we can't do it because of this. We can't, can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. And sometimes it's not, but we can't, it's because we don't want to. Right. And we create an excuse or a reason. And excuses are such a big thing. And we've talked about this, and maybe we'll talk about this. I think this is a topic for later on the season too. Like, any reason to cancel a show nowadays. It exists. Yeah. And we have this long list of reasons that can now cancel a show. And nobody will question it because of the new society and the cancel culture and the woke and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, how about, like, just for the betterment of the individual? How about for the betterment of what we're doing? Or, how about just for the challenge of it? But again, I've always learned that people will do and make time for the things that they want. The things that they don't want, they'll come up with every reason in the world not to do it. And sometimes they'll fight harder for that than they will for the more important things. You know what I mean? Because they'll put on a show, they'll put on the airs, and they'll sometimes take a narcissistic approach and throw it back on you. It's like, well, you're the one causing the problems because you want to do the show. You know what I mean? And because I don't want to do it, I'm the bad guy? Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, sometimes you got to weigh the options. And that's the thing, I think, with being in a band. Like, if you're a solo artist, it's just you. You make these decisions, right? Right. And it's basically just a one-to-one situation. But when you're dealing with a band with 3 members, 2 members, 3 members, 4 members, 5 members, whatever, Earth, Wind, and Fire, 25 members, it doesn't matter. Like, now you're making decisions and bringing up opportunity that's going to affect a larger range of people. It's just like a jury. If one person is swaying the other way, that holds up the other people. I've been a firm believer. It's like, listen, you do whatever you want in your life. It's none of my business. However, with whatever you're doing in your life starts to affect my life in any way, shape, or form, now there's a bit of an issue. And I think that people in bands sometimes don't see it that way. It's like, well, if you have 4 people and you've been at it for quite a while and you're not just some every so often weekend warrior band, and then all of a sudden one guy starts throwing a wrench in there. Well, and because, like, they're looking at it as like, well, my life is doing this now, this is what I have to do. But if you're not taking into consideration how that is affecting the other guys, and just because you may not be taking it as seriously or see it as important at the moment as the other guys do, doesn't mean that what the other guys are feeling and doing is any less important. Just because you now don't deem it as such. Right. And that's sometimes an attitude that is common within bands, especially bands that have been around for quite a while. And I think that that's a bit unfair because, again, it's the same thing with your wife or your girlfriend or your children. Like, things that you do and decide can have great impact on their lives as well, whether you realize it or not. Life's changing. It's okay. I get it. It's going to change. It's not. Things are never going to stay the same. But you made a commitment, and you have to decide. It's just like your job. You're not going to quit your job. You're not going to quit your job simply because your job's paying you. And in most cases with these band situations, it's kind of like herd football, right? Or herd soccer. It's not that important in the grand scheme, and if it's not paying your bills, it's easy to dismiss. especially when push comes to shove. So that's sometimes where passion will lose out on some people, and it's the people that are being driven by passion that will keep going even in the eye of the storm. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
again, it is a balancing point. It's not easy. It's really not easy. And these are the things that you'll, again, the longer you're at it, you're dealing with on a band constantly. And like you were saying, like you get new members in, they have to learn that culture. And I think we talked about that in season 1 or 2, understanding that culture. It may be completely foreign to them. This may be their first band. This may be their first quote-unquote real band. And by that, I mean a band that's striving for more than just playing your local bar every couple weeks, just for fun and beer money or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's a shock to the system. I've had people in the band that's like, oh, my God, you actually got to work. It's not just dressing up and dyeing my hair. No, it's not.
No.
I mean, you could do that, but then there's this whole other aspect that happens, in between. So, it can be tough, man. It can be tough for sure.
It is. Again, relationships they're not easy. So there's many aspects to relationship, and bands are no different. You just have more people to deal with,
Yeah, listen, I think that the major aspect of what we've talked about in this show, about what we've learned about being a band, it really comes down to that relationship, like you're saying, how we deal with that relationship, how we respect that relationship, nurture it, help it continue to grow. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen for everybody, right?
No.
Sometimes the growing stops, it falls apart, it dies, for a lack of a better word. I mean, example, like if you've read the stories of Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons from Kiss, they've had their ups and downs, major ups and downs.
Major.
Paul had, serious resentment and anger, and he was taking shots and all. And then, they've kind of come full circle where, you'll hear Paul talk today about, their brothers. He doesn't feel that he would have been able to achieve what he achieved without Gene by his side.
Right.
And they were stronger together than apart. However, he'll be the first to tell you that they're two completely different people, and they live two completely separate lives. Mm-hmm. But they're there for one another. But they had to go through 50 years of such a thing. Now, it also, again, their ups and downs in career are not as bad as, hey, they were living in a cardboard shack or whatever. But, it can be bruising to the ego, especially at that level, and then coming down and then working your way back up and all that kind of stuff. But it does help when you have a machine such as Kiss to kind of draw you back. I think that if that band completely fizzled out and there was nothing there, I don't know if that would have ever been something that they could have saved in terms of friendship. Maybe it has. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching. But I do think that core of that Kiss machine helped keep that alive because they both had something to come back to. Yeah. So, but look at Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. They had their difficulties, and I mean Don Dokken and George Lynch, which I still think that they have difficulties till today, but they kind of every so often just kind of swoop in and out for the payday. I don't know, but. I guess you can definitely work with people and not necessarily like them. Though I've always struggled with that, but that's just
me too. I can't. Like that's just not. It's just not something that I enjoy doing. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of people that I thoroughly enjoyed, their company and their time and their conversations. And, there's only one or two guys I can think of through the years that when they left the band, I was like, oh, thank God. But it was more of like, I don't have to deal with that negative energy anymore. It didn't make them a bad person. I just didn't want to deal with that negative energy. So when they were gone, I was like, oh, I could breathe a little bit. But I never understood. I could not be in a band with someone that I just didn't get along with.
Yeah, I agree.
I can never, when I was growing up, I thought everybody was like, the Monkees. Everybody got along and everybody was, hanging out together. And, I didn't know till I was older that Van Halen was very dysfunctional and, Dokken, they didn't get along. And, all these major, you can go on and on and on. Paul and Gene. Like, I always expected them to be this, this brother, these two brothers that were constantly together, and they did everything together, and come to find out that, there were many years that they just didn't even, more Paul, that, they couldn't even be in the same room, and Motley, the same thing. And I never understood that, because I could never do that. Now, maybe if it's my job and I'm making millions of dollars, then maybe I could do that. But I could tell you, I wouldn't enjoy it. That would really bum me out.
Yeah, I've always felt that I needed some level of connection to really be able to flourish. Though I have worked with people or who've been in the band, thankfully, short periods of time that I just could not get along with. But, we had to get through whatever we were doing, and I can, but long term, it's,
no, couldn't do it.
Yeah, I could maintain some of it on stage, but then outside, it just didn't work well for me. It wasn't good for my spiritual health, my mental health, emotional health, so I get it. So, yeah, there you go, man. You got anything else you want to add?
No, sir, I do not.
I mean, I'm sure there's tons of stuff, but I think where it comes down to that core, it's definitely a relationship builder. Different personalities. It's just like with any other walk of life. It's like a job. You learn how to deal with certain things. But I think that there's an even deeper connection to sometimes bandmates as opposed to just other employees in an office or in a factory or something like that. Yeah. So, keep your communication lines open. You'd be surprised at how much you can accomplish. If you like this episode, check out some of our other episodes at www.thecosmicvoice.com. Step into the Cosmic Verse. You'll never know what you'll find. Thanks so much for listening. This is the Cosmic Voice. Be sure to check us out at thecosmicvoice.com. Like and follow us on Facebook at The Cosmic Voice. You can find The Cosmic Voice everywhere you listen to online podcasts, like Deezer, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, and so many more.
Okay, folks, that will do it for another episode of The Cosmic Voice. Mick and I would like to say thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
You're listening to The Cosmic Voice. Music, talk, and nothing but business.